All right, so we're looking at a 2008 Mini Cooper S. It's in here for a high pressure fuel pump and a thermostat housing. Here's a thermostat housing here. It's got a whole bunch of hoses going to it. It's pretty crazy how many hoses go to it. The thermostat's in there. It's got a new seal and a new temperature sensor already installed in it. And then we have the high pressure fuel pump, which goes right on the cylinder head, locks into the camshaft. It actually works out pretty good. That is above the thermostat housing. So I'll be able to pull that fuel pump off, and then the thermostat housing is right underneath there. The car is jacked up right now because we're draining the fluid out of it to make less of a mess when we pull that thermostat housing off. There's two hoses under there that connect right in the middle. Just loosen up one of the hose clamps, pull those two hoses off underneath by the radiator, and that should drain out most of the fluid inside of the radiator. So anyway, I'll get the tools ready. We need a T30 for that fuel pump, and we'll start working on this thing and get it tore down. First thing you want to do is remove this air intake here. This is an aftermarket one, so yours might look a little bit different as far as the air filter goes. There's usually a box up there, but this one's aftermarket. So anyway, we'll just get this out of the way. There's one hose clamp and some hoses and a few like the MAF sensor and a few other things that need to come loose off of it. And we'll go ahead and remove that, and that'll give us access to that fuel pump, which is right underneath this. So it's pretty simple. I won't show that. We'll go ahead and remove it real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and get a rag for any fuel that gets dropped and get a 12mm wrench. Here's a high pressure fuel pump right here. You can see it's right on the end of the cylinder. So I got a rag under there. You'll lose a little bit of fuel when you loosen that main high pressure line, but it's not a crazy amount. It's 12mm, and then that'll come out. And then this one here is like the low pressure return line, I guess, and that is, Mini says you need a special tool to remove that. I don't have that tool, so the trick to that is to press it in all the way. I've actually seen people able to just press it in all the way and put their fingers in those holes there and press down on the black tab and pull it out. I wasn't able to do that. So I use a small screwdriver and a small Allen wrench on either side of that line. Put it in the window, pressed in on it, and then pulled it out. It came out pretty easily. You don't want to press super hard and damage that clip inside there, otherwise it won't seal back up when you put it back together. The tool's probably about $30 on Amazon, so if you work on minis a lot or own one, it might not be a bad investment to go ahead and pick it up. But I don't work on minis too much, so I'm not going to worry about it. You got one electrical connector on the bottom of this pump, and then there's three T30 bolts that hold it to the head, and it's driven by the camshaft. So here's the new one here. You got a bolt hole there, bolt hole here. You can see the electrical connector right there, the black part, and then there's another bolt hole right there. So there's three all together. So I'm going to go ahead. I already got the two on the bottom loose. Get a magnet. It makes it easier once you get it loose to pull it out. Some of those bolts will drop down in there. So just get a magnet once you get it loose and you can pull them out. And anyway, that's a T30. So I got just the top one left. I'm going to go ahead and zip that one off. The bottom two bolts were pretty corroded. So I'm going to have to put these in a buff-off wheel and clean up the threads on it. It just looks like just a lot of corrosion on there. They kind of weren't real hard to get off, but they're definitely corroded. So I got this last one to come off, and then this thing should just pull right out of there. You got three of those bolts. So just grab it and pull it forward and out, and this is where it locks into the camshaft right here. And this is the rubber seal that goes around that keeps it from oil leaking out of the side of the head. Your new fuel pump should have, the new fuel pump should have that seal already. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this off to the side. I'm not going to install the new one yet because the thermostat housing is right underneath this, and it's a lot easier to leave this. You don't have to take this off to get to the thermostat housing, but it makes it a lot easier. I went ahead and took this off. There's two brackets or a bracket with 2 bolts just to get out of the way. It's right above the thermostat housing. It also holds the wiring harness stable against there, and that's the thermostat. Here we got the temperature sensor right here. I already unplugged that, so that's unplugged, and the new one comes with a new sensor, so we don't have to worry about taking that out or replacing that. And now it's just a matter of taking out a whole bunch of these hoses right here. Got 3 over here. One's underneath it. It goes to the turbo. These 2 top, and then guess it never fails. The phone always rings when I'm trying to do a video here. Anyway, it's just a matter of taking a whole bunch of these hoses off. There's 3 10mm bolts to hold this housing to the head. So I'm going to go ahead and take these 2 off here in the front. You can see here, took them off. There's one more underneath there for the turbo. It goes straight to the turbo. And I used this remote hose clamp remover to get the clamps, because they're kind of in an awkward position. I'm old school. I always use channel locks, but every once in a while I break these things out. So that thing's remote, and it's got a cable. You don't have to get your whole hand down in there to get it loose. Then we got some more back here, and then we got a big crossover. So anyway, let's keep going with it on it. This is the new one here. You can see all the hoses that are all the outlets that are coming out of this thing. So we'll get back to it. It's much easier to use these tools. These are the hose clamp remover pliers. I had this angled one worked really well for one of the back hoses. It was this bottom one here towards the back. It was real hard to get anything straight in there, but with that angled pliers, we was able to get that clamp out pretty quickly. And then the bottom one here hooks to the turbo. It's a hard line most of the way, and that one doesn't want to come off all the way with the housing still bolted up. So I'm gonna I got it loose, got the clamp pulled back, and I'm going to pull that one the rest of the way off once I pull the housing off. And then you have the big crossover tube in the back, which is just held on by a clip, and I'll kind of show you that. But then we'll take those 3 10mm bolts out, and we should be able to pull this away from the head, and then take the remainder. They got that turbo line and the back crossover still to get off, and we should be able to pull it off out of the block there, or the head, and start putting the new one in. Like I said, it's definitely easier with these tools, these hose clamp tools. This remote one I use on 3 or 4 of them. It helped out a lot. So it might be a good investment. Normally I would say don't worry about it on most of these jobs I do. I just use regular channel locks, but with this particular car, getting your hand down in there with the channel locks at the right angle and everything can be kind of a challenge. So I don't know, it might be worth it to invest in those wrenches or those pliers for this kind of a job. I don't use them a whole lot, but when I do use them, they really save your bacon quite a bit. It's one of those things that if you have to use them, it really saves you a lot of time. So anyway, I will we'll start getting that housing loose off the head there, and start putting this new one back in real quick here. Alright, so here's the housing off, and here's the crossover tube in the back right here, and that's the clip you have to pull out. You can pull it out by hand, probably. I did, and that'll release the back. And then here's the 3 bolt holes, 10mm. Got 1 on the top and then 2 on kind of the bottom there on each end of it. And then right there is where the turbo line goes. And that one's kind of hard to pull off while that housing's still bolted to the head. So I had it partially off and then just pull it off the rest of the way. And like I said, it makes it easier if you have the fuel pump off, but it's not 100% necessary to do that. You can leave it on if you're just changing the thermostat housing. It just makes it a lot easier. We're doing both of these jobs at once today. So The new one comes with a gasket, new gasket. This is the old gasket. They're kind of reusable, but it doesn't matter because the new one comes with a gasket, and comes with a new temperature sensor already installed, and the new thermostat obviously is already installed in it. So the new one's ready to go right out of the box, at least the one that we got. So when I set it back in there, I'll put the crossover pipe on and get it started and get that turbo line started on the side, and then we will start the 3 bolts and start to run those down evenly, and then we should be able to slip that turbo line all the way on, put the clamp on, and slip that crossover pipe all the way in and put that clip back in. So you can see here I got it all set back in, and the crossover pipe is in, and I got the 3 bolts started on it. So now it's basically just a matter of putting all those hoses back on. There's like I said, 5, 6, 7 hoses you got to put back on. So I'll start with I got the turbo hose already on there and that clamp on. So I'll start these 2 upper ones and work my way to the back. Like I said before, I got the crossover with the pipe in. So after you get all that done, we'll put a little bit of oil on the seal on this new fuel pump. Just grab a little bit more oil, whatever you have laying around, and just lube that seal up so that it slides in there and makes a good seal against the head. And then you have to index this with your camshaft, the end of the pump, so it won't go in all the way unless you have this lined up with the end of your camshaft. It doesn't really matter which way it goes. It's not indexed or anything, but you do have to have it lined up so that it'll slide in and then go up against the block. So you can see here I got it in there, and I got it up all the way against the head there. And I'm going to go ahead and start the 3 T30s that we have and torque those down. And then we'll start on the fuel lines and putting the rest of the stuff back together. But this is pretty much, this is a low pressure line. That one will just push in, snap right in. And then the 12 millimeter, just make sure your line is real straight. You don't want to cross thread that on the new pump. So make sure you get that started and straight. Put that line in, the 3 bolts and the line, and then torque it down. And then I'm going to put this bracket back on. That's just for pulling the engine, and also holds that wiring harness up against the block. That wiring harness you see there actually clicks onto that bracket that I'm putting back on. And then the 2 ends of the wiring harness down below actually slide into the actual thermostat housing. It's got like 2 little towers on it. So here I'm just hooking back up the temperature sensor before I cover it up with that wiring harness. And then you have a few other whatever else you took loose. I didn't have to take too many connectors off, mainly just for that intake tube and this temperature sensor here, and then whatever else, a few other little things. So once you get that in, you're pretty much ready to put the air intake back on and get to the point where you start putting coolant back in it and starting it up and checking for leaks. Like I said, this line here just slides back in. It should snap. You should hear it click or snap back in. And then just got a few little connectors to put back. And we'll put that intake back on. And be almost done with this thing. Hopefully there's no leaks, or shouldn't be. Everything's new on it. So we should be good to go with all that. Alright, so here's that kit I've been using. It's my Stark. I've had it probably 5, 6, 7 years. I don't know. It's not super expensive. I got it on Amazon, I think, and I didn't buy the real, I don't know if Matco or Mac or Snap-on makes a kit. I didn't buy that because I really don't use these that much. 9 times out of 10, I can get them off with my pliers and my channel locks. But this kit here, I think was either 30 or 60 bucks, somewhere in that range, and it has a bunch of it's got 7 different pliers. This is one of the ones I use a lot because it's angled. It's got a good angle on it. And then it's got the various other ones, and then I use the remote one quite a bit. Well, not quite a bit. I do use the remote one. So you know, you don't necessarily have to have them, but there's some situations where these things will really save you a lot of time and hassle. They're not super expensive. Like I said, I didn't pay an arm and a leg for them. This isn't like a real expensive kit. I got it off of Amazon. If I can find a link for it on Amazon, I'll link it so you can go take a look at it and check it out. It's a pretty good little kit. It's not, like I said, it's not super high quality, but again, it's all it's doing is taking off a hose clamp, so it's not like it has to be a snap-on pliers to take off a hose clamp. It's one of those tools I got that I use every great once in a while, and when I do use it, I'm thankful I have them. But for the price, these are pretty good. So I'll try to find a link for these, and I'll put that in the description in case you want to check them out. And so anyway, I just wanted to kind of show that. That's the Stark 7-piece kit. I'm not sponsored or anything. I bought those a long time ago, and you know, they come in handy when you're in a jam sometimes. So that's pretty much it on that. We will got the intake back on, and I'm pretty much just gonna fill her up with coolant and get it off the stands, and make sure that you put your hose back together under the radiator there if you took it off before you put coolant in it. Otherwise, it's just going to drip right out. So this is basically the time when I would just kind of go through and double check all my work, make sure all the wire connectors are hooked back up, and make sure everything's tight, clamps, make sure all your hoses are back on, and just kind of double check your work. I went ahead and blew the transmission, because no matter how much fluid you take out, you're going to lose a little bit of fluid when you take that housing off. So I went ahead and blew the transmission off with compressed air, got rid of any puddles or anything down there, and went ahead and cleaned it up. And like I said, make sure you put that hose on the bottom. And I think I lost maybe a gallon and a half of coolant out of this. So you want to make sure that you fill that back up. And you know, this isn't a super hard job, not super involved, but just take your time with it and don't get too frustrated with those hose clamps, and you'll be okay on it. So anyway, I'm going to start this thing up, check for leaks, make sure nothing's leaking, check the fuel, coolant, make sure nothing's leaking, and then get this on the ground, take it for a test drive, and get this back to him. Thanks for watching. I hope you subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you on the next video, and have a good one until we see you next time.